Okay, here we go.
Cool.
Hey, everybody, it's Chris, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Nathan Gershfeld. After having a life-changing health experience, Dr. Gershfeld changed careers from electrical engineer to chiropractor. Following an internship under Dr. Alan Goldhamer, he joined the staff doctors at the world-renowned True North Health Center from 2011 to 2014, and after that, he moved his practice to Orange County and is now the founder and director of Fasting Escape, which is a inpatient fasting center and health program in Orange County, California. He currently serves on the board of the True North Health Foundation, and he's the producer and creator of the Beat Your Genes, Genes podcast. So it's good to connect with you, Nathan, and I'm excited to hear your story, how you how you decided to switch from engineering to chiropractic, right? And then how you connected with Dr. Goldhamer and got into fasting and all that. So let's hear it.
Great to be here, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on. This journey. So I told you right before we started recording, I just finished reading your book, the Chris Beat Cancer book, and it was kind of surprisingly similar with kind of the journey I went through. And so kind of I can just tell the whole story from the beginning. So it kind of starts with actually my grandmother, who came from the Soviet Union and always had problems with her health. And so she was asking anybody she could. She even stood in the lines at the bank and would ask people if they knew anything about health and wellness. And eventually she got connected to some chiropractor who helped her with some of her back problems. And then she decided, after 30 years of being a chemistry teacher, she decided, now I want to go become a chiropractor, with all the knowledge that, trying to learn how to help people and learn about nutrition. Well, in chiropractic school, she met somebody who was bringing a lunchbox full of fruits and vegetables every day. And at that time, it was kind of weird. So she would ask him, "What are you doing? Why aren't you eating like everybody else?" And he said, "Well, I'm trying to live healthfully and do a raw food or a plant-based diet." Or at that time, I think it was just a vegan or strict vegetarian diet, as it was called. So she went into a really, interesting period where that's what she wanted to know about. Every book she read, she would go to health food stores, read everything she could about it. And eventually she started trying to tell me and my sisters and my cousins, all her grandkids. But none of us were ready for it because we were, we would be eating junk foods. In fact, the joke at the house was, when grandma's coming over, you got to hide the junk food because she would throw it away. If she saw it, she'd throw it away.
I've got two teenagers, and one of them, the older one, is like, she loves junk food. And of course, we don't really buy it, but she loves it. And she's just recently decided that she wants to be into healthy food now and get into healthy food. So yeah, I totally can relate.
Yeah. And it's, so as kids, we really didn't pay attention too much. I mean, we didn't have the health problems that she had. So it was more just a joke, like, "Oh, grandma's coming, we got to hide the food." But it didn't really ring true until in my junior and senior year of college for electrical engineering. I developed a tumor in my neck. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know what all of that meant. And I went to the doctor and they said, "Well, you got a lump in your neck, and here, let's schedule for surgery. And let's do a biopsy first, and we're going to do surgery. And depending on the biopsy, if it's cancer, we're going to cut the whole thing out. And if it's not cancer, we're going to cut half of the thyroid out." I thought, I don't want to cut anything out. So they said I had Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. I didn't know what any of that meant. So I went to grandma because she's the one who knew about health and healing. And it turned out, she said, "Well, no matter what it is, you go see the doctor or not, it doesn't change the fact you have to stop eating junk food, that you have to eat really well, eat really clean, infuse yourself with all kinds of minerals and vitamins and nutrients, get out in the sun, get good sleep, get exercise." Basically, it makes no difference how they want to call the disease. You have to do the right thing. You have to do the correct strategy as far as health goes in order to get as healthy as possible, that your body can take care of it. And she basically said, your body can take care of almost anything if you give it the right conditions. So I went to the doctor anyway. They wanted to do some biopsy, but she did tell me that just be careful because, once they get you on the train, it's hard to get off the train. So I didn't do the biopsy. The doctor, I was kind of asking him what was going on. And, I wanted more questions. The main thing she told me to ask him is, what's the cause of this? And if we don't know the cause and you start cutting things out, or if you start doing, drug treatments, won't it come back somewhere else if you don't remove the cause? And so he was kind of irritated at me. I don't know why for
Good
asking
question.
those questions.
Really good question.
And so I just got the sense that I wasn't really going to be helped there. So I just asked him, what is the worst case scenario? Just in case. He said, well, worst case scenario is you have 5 years if it's really aggressive, if it actually is cancer. And then best case is it just sits there and nothing, doesn't do anything, and it's benign. So as an engineer, they teach you to, solve problems as though they're the worst case scenario. So I just went off the deep end thinking that it's the worst case scenario. So I started reading just like my grandma did. I started reading everything she gave me, read everything I could, tried a whole bunch of things that I could try to, basically the idea was to try to get my body as healthy as humanly possible. And in all of that, I tried different diets, the raw vegan diet, the vegan diet. I tried all kinds of different types of supplements and pills and potions and powders and all kinds of different things. Similar in kind of your journey as you went through this thing. It was really interesting to read some of the things. I was like, oh yeah, I remember I came across this and that, and it was really interesting. And so in all of this, my grandma said, well, there's also this like crazy water fasting clinic up in Northern California, and you may want to go check them out because they can help as well. So I called, Dr. Goldhamer. I looked it up, thought it was really interesting. They were applying all of these things that I had read about, but all in one particular place. So they were able to do all of those things. So I called Dr. Goldhamer, scheduled a fast. He told me, make sure you eat pretty good before you come do the fast. And I went up there, did the fast, and I was scheduled to do 30 days of water fasting. So I was about the same size I was now. So 30 days of water fasting is a lot. I did not realize just how tough it would be.
Oh man.
And I only lasted like 5 days.
Yeah.
So, but apparently that was enough because the next ultrasound I got a few months later, and then every follow-up after that, the tumor shrunk like 80%. So that was really encouraging. And the autoimmune disease went away, and so did the hypothyroidism. The thyroid levels went back to normal.
5-day water fast. Mm-hmm. And then you followed up with an ultrasound and it had shrunk, but then it just continued to shrink. And did you do any more fasting during that period of time?
Yeah, I did a few fasts here and there, and then I just followed it up. I stopped doing ultrasounds because they were, the insurance wouldn't continually do ultrasound unless you're treating it. So I stopped doing ultrasounds, but it's still there, but it's like 80, 90% smaller than it was in the beginning. So, and the blood tests I follow up with every year, and they're all, remain normal. So the most interesting part of the fast is that I had been struggling, like I think a lot of people do, when even though they know they're supposed to go to eat the right foods and stay away from junk foods and whatnot, even if that they know conceptually what to do, it was really difficult to do. And so avoiding the, more, processed vegan food or even the, processed salty, richer, fatty foods, it can be really tough and difficult. And so what I noticed is that after the fast, my taste buds had gotten so sensitive that healthy food actually tasted really, really good. And so that allowed me to break that cycle and then get that momentum back so that I could get back on the healthy foods. So that was really, really interesting to watch that happen in myself. And then now I do that with patients. So,
oh yeah, a piece of fruit after you've been on a water fast is like the best thing you've ever eaten.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I still remember the first bite of steamed vegetables. I had never had steamed vegetables before that. And even after 5 days of fasting, it was like plate of steamed cauliflower, plate of steamed Swiss chard was like an unbelievable experience. And I still remember that. It still tastes just as good now as it did back then. And every time I have it, it's like, it reminds me of that first time I had it. So
it's like that expression, hunger is the best condiment, right?
Right. I'd never heard that before. And I love that. I love that immediately.
Yeah.
So yeah. And in fact, I might use that with some patients here.
Oh yeah, man. So,
Yeah.
That's really cool. So then you had this experience, obviously that changed your life, and, but you were still in engineering school. Is that right?
Yeah. So it was actually, I did the fast after I graduated. So I had been, so this was like August 2004. that this all happened, and I was set to graduate in June of 2000. August 2005, I was set to graduate June of 2006, and so I was, I went and I noticed the tumor about December 2004. So I didn't do anything about it. I didn't go to the doctor until August. So I started reading about health and wellness and started getting nervous and whatnot. And so it'd been almost a year and a half of just immersing myself in health and wellness and trying to find the answers in a time when, as you remember, there was no YouTube. There wasn't a lot of stuff on the internet other than forums out there. So you really could only find things that other people kind of testimonials. And, but really it was wandering in the health food store and looking at books and reading those magazines and books and trying to call people and ask them.
And the forums weren't very helpful because people that would share sort of like their testimonials and things, it was a short, it was just a short little post.
Right.
Right. There was very little comprehensive information, about anything health, right? People be like, oh, I did the raw food diet, and that's like all I would say, or something. And so, and now it's a lot better. There's a lot more information online.
Right. Now people will do daily updates on a video blog, about how they're feeling. So you can kind of piece together what you might experience. And even then it's tougher, but it was way tougher back then. But yeah, so this was happening during my last year and a half of engineering. So it's like everybody was stressing about, passing their engineering training exam and, doing their senior projects and worrying about what job they're going to have and whether they're going to go to master's program. And I was sitting there worried like, oh, I wonder where this is going to take me. And so it was still fun. I was still doing well in engineering, but my mind was elsewhere. I was starting to think, gosh, maybe if I really did have 5 years to live, would I want to spend it in a cubicle, soldering components together, breathing in those fumes and
right.
And doing engineering type
circuit
work.
boards.
Yeah. Yeah. And over and over, the answer was starting to look like no. So, and also I started becoming more passionate about health and wellness. Like for me as an engineer, it was like going outside, taking a walk barefoot on the grass was like, you do that in between class if you're like, in the social sciences department, and, taking a guitar class, so, whereas I was starting to get into that stuff, it was just more interesting to me to be out and, watch a sunset. So, it just so happened that when I graduated and did all this stuff, I get a letter from the local chiropractic college because I had been going to different little trade shows and conferences and whatnot and putting my name down for an email for the naturopathic colleges, the medical schools, and the chiropractic schools. So I get an email from the local chiropractic college saying, "Oh, come and have a tour. We are, our fall application our fall semester is starting." So I was like, "Oh, why not? On the whim, let me just go there and check it out." So I went, saw the campus, looked in on some of the lectures, and it was just like it just made sense. I said, I want to learn how the body works formally, and wanted to do that. And so I started that program. I also called Dr. Goldhamer. And said, "Hey, listen, I've read all your books, I've read all your blogs, your articles. This is what I want to do. Can I come and intern with you?" And at first he said, "Well, we really don't do that unless you're done with school, or at least partway through school." But I don't know what happened, what I said, but somehow I convinced him. And I said, "Well, I got 3 weeks before school actually starts, and I'd like to come and just watch you." And I know how to keep my mouth shut, my eyes and ears open, and I'll wash your shoes, shine your shoes, wash your toilets, and wash your dishes. Just let me come and look. Let me come and see it.
There's no dishes at the fasting clinic. I'm just kidding.
So somehow he let me come in, and I guess at some level I was trying to see, like, I had called a few of the other people that were in the books that I'd read or the pamphlets that I'd seen in the health food store, and they hadn't really been forthcoming about things that they did. And so I wasn't that interested in that. So I was trying to also see, like, does this actually work? Do I want to spend the next few years of my life learning about this and then only to be disappointed after all this time? But can I just
interrupt you there? Because this is actually a really good lesson for a young person that's trying to figure out what they want to do as a career. The thing where you said you weren't sure if you'd want to be an engineer because you'd never actually worked as an engineer at that point. And then being persistent and getting Dr. Goldhamer to let you just shadow him for a couple of weeks. It's like, I feel like every person should do that every young person should do that before they pursue 4 or 6 or 8, 10 years, right, of a career, especially in medicine, right? It's like
Right.
there's a decade of your life that you
Right.
have to sacrifice to become a doctor. And doctors have some of the highest rates of suicide. And I think it's because the fantasy and the reality don't line up. They think it's going to be like Grey's Anatomy or something, and they go through
Right.
10 years of struggle, and then they get there and they're like, oh, I don't even like this
Right.
job.
And for the decent people, the really decent doctors, they actually want to get their patients better. And so, but it turns out a lot of the therapies don't really get anybody better. They just delay the inevitable, and they leave the person feeling really terrible and really almost betrayed, because obviously there's responsibility on both sides, but you have a patient coming in expecting the doctor's going to get them better. I mean, I've had patients where the doctor doesn't tell them anything, and they come do a fast, and they reverse 20, 30 years of diabetes and high blood pressure on medications. And they're elated, but they're also kind of angry. And they tell me, why didn't my doctor tell me this? I've been asking them if there's anything else I can do the whole time I've been going to them. So and so the doctors actually want to get their patients better. They're going to have to do some sort of lifestyle thing, because they're not going to see anybody get better unless they change the cause of what's going on.
Right. And I can empathize, because being a doctor is almost like being a supermarket cashier. The volume of people, it's not that extreme, but the volume of people that are you having to deal with every single day, and not having enough quality time with the patient to really just help them figure out what's causing their disease and what changes they can make to their life to help themselves. It's just, there's only just enough time to like, hi, how are you? What are your symptoms? Here's a drug that might help that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So job satisfaction is pretty low.
Yeah. Yeah. And, something's got to change. I think the patients who really, it's really so far, I think the only patients who really do get the answers are the ones who are pushy enough, and they're motivated enough to really either educate their doctor, if that's even possible, or find the doctors that actually are already up to speed. And these are the pioneers, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Ornish, Dr. Goldhamer, all these doctors, Dr. T. Colin Campbell, Dr. Lyle, all these doctors are pioneers, and kind of we're standing, I'm standing on the shoulders of these giants because of this. So
legends. I'm a huge fan of all those guys.
Yeah.
So, okay. So there you are. You intern for a couple weeks. And I guess you saw some things that made you want to pursue this.
Yeah. So I walked in.
Anything noteworthy from those first couple of weeks as an intern?
Yeah. So I walked in, and it's like I walked in and start meeting all the patients. So one of the attending doctors, had me, dressed to like professional clothes as soon as I walked in, and we went on the rounds to meet all the patients, saying this is the new intern. And I met.
Was Dr. Clapper there at the time?
No, he wasn't. He was there when I was. He was there, I think, the third year that I was an intern, and then he got there a little bit later. But yeah, so I showed up. They introduced me all the patients, and then also to the other intern there, who was a medical doctor from Johns Hopkins University. And she said, "Well, we're going to be interning together," because I didn't know how to take blood pressure. I didn't know anything clinical. I was really there, just doing whatever, like the gopher work that they needed to.
Yeah.
So
just loitering mostly.
Yeah. And so, eating the food, just loitering around, So then she proceeded to explain to me some of the conditions that people had. I didn't know what lupus meant. I'd seen House, the TV show. And so like every diagnosis potentially could be lupus. And so I wanted to know what that was. She explained how the high blood pressure works and how diabetes works. And it just went through some of the most interesting things. And then we started meeting the patients and getting their stories. And it was really amazing, because a lot of these patients, they had spent a lot of time and a lot of money in their last few decades trying to find the best doctors for their particular condition. Like I remember one lady who had systemic lupus erythematosus, and she had spent thousands and thousands of dollars seeing specialist after specialist after specialist, and she had been put on all kinds of different drugs for the condition. And eventually she finds water fasting through a book called The Lupus Recovery Diet, which is a book by Jill Harrington, who came to True North, had lupus, reversed itself, and then she came back and interviewed a few other patients who had similar inflammatory conditions and autoimmune conditions. So this lady, she was on her day 14 or 15 of a water fast. And for me, I was like, okay, I'd read about this. I'd never actually met someone who hadn't eaten for 14 or 15 days. And I was there for 3 weeks. So I got to see her finish her fast and then reintroduce food. And she's saying that she's sleeping better than she's ever felt. Her joint pain is not anywhere close to how it was before. Another guy that he came in, he had 90% blockage in his arteries, in his heart arteries, and the doctor had essentially said that you could die at any minute. And so you unless you do this particular procedure, I think it was a stent or some sort of procedure, I don't remember what it was, that you're not our patient. And so he had gone to a few other alternative clinics in the country as well, and they wouldn't accept him because he was too sick, and they didn't want that to be on their hands. So he came and did a water fast. And so he was there, I think the first or second time I was there as an intern. And he did a 3-week water fast, lost weight. I remember we took a drill and we're drilling holes into his belt every week as he lost weight and was able to put new holes in there.
My mind just flashed to like, what, before you said belt, I was like, what is he about to say? They're drilling holes into his belly fat. I don't know. Yeah. So he was, I'm sure he was overweight.
Yep. Yeah. And then, I think the third or fourth time I was at True North as an intern, he had come back and now, he was trim and fit, and they had redone the angiogram, and it was like his arteries were essentially clear at that point.
And that was how much time had gone by?
A few years, 2 years or so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he was trim, he was trim and fit, he looked completely different than when he had first shown up there, and it was incredible. So
that's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. People with high blood pressure. I mean, as I'm seeing now with my own center, people with high blood pressure and type 2 diabetes, it's essentially the simplest thing to deal with as far as, you just change your diet, do the fast, and brings it down. Other ones, sometimes you got to wait a little longer, adjust the diet, do a few different fasts and different timing. But I was seeing those things and just learning them for the first time, and it's just unbelievable. So, and I was calling my grandma, every few days or so, and sharing with her, and she's like, "See, I told you, the body can heal itself."
That's amazing. So you got hooked, and then obviously went to school for a few years,
mm-hmm.
and then we were continue to intern there.
Yeah. So we would have, a trimester, 10 weeks of school, and then we'd have, or 12 weeks of school, and then we'd have a 1 or 2 or 3 week break depending on the semester. And so I would just, the day I would finish, I would, have a day to pack up, and then I'd call Dr. Goldhamer, I'd drive up to True North and stay there for the entire break and until the day before, and then come back and go to school. So it was really, really fun because if nothing else, for those 1 or 2 weeks, I could eat really clean and get good sleep and work my butt off in a good way. So I felt like productive throughout the day and learn a lot. And then, that was a 2-week break where I actually, did really well. And then my last semester of school, I was able to get it so I can do my training at True North and complete a formal internship. So True North has like a 6-month internship for hygienic doctors or people wanting to be hygienic doctors. And so I was able to do that 6 months in a row. So you could see several dozen or, many, many patients that go from the beginning and all the way to the end of the fast and the refeed period. So you're not just kind of coming in, in the middle of anything. So
what is a hygienic doctor for people that don't?
Natural hygiene is the approach that we're trying to essentially be clean with our living. So we believe that, diet, sleep, exercise, sunshine, air, laughter, appropriate response to stress, and a loving social circle. Those are going to be the key tenets of being a healthy human being. And the more we work on those, the better results we can expect. So that's called natural hygiene.
Yep.
Doesn't necessarily have to be natural hygiene. That's just a way of healthy living. That's just a system that has been kind of called to use all those things.
And that movement started in the 60s, didn't it? Or was it before that?
I thought it was before that, because there's books written, I think, in the early 1900s too, by like guys like John Tilden, even people like John Harvey Kellogg, who made the Kellogg cereals, and Sylvester Graham from the graham crackers. Yeah. They had their toes in that movement as well, because they had other motivations, but they had their toes in that field where they were trying to live a healthier lifestyle.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you opened your own practice, right? Well, you went to work for True North for 4 years or so. And
So I finished my training, and then Dr. Goldhamer asked me if I could be on staff, and absolutely, I said yes. This is what I want to do. So the goal was I told him, I said my intention is I want to learn how to run a clinic because I want to start my own. So he was training me how to do that. He said the most important part is making sure that you don't accept people that aren't going to do well on the fast, because you don't want to give them wrong expectations. And here's what you can't fast these people. They're just physiologically, that's not going to do well. And then, so we trained there, and then I was supervising patients. And then the time came.
What are some of the criteria for someone that, that would preclude them from doing a water fast?
The most common nowadays is going to be fear of fasting. Okay. So,
really?
So if someone is scared and they do not want to fast, that's something where we really don't want to push them into doing so. Okay. But the most common one besides that is going to be if someone's on medications other than thyroid medications or hormone medications. So the medications are all toxic. So that's what's called pharmacotoxicology. And so the dose makes the poison. So really the medical doctors will prescribe drugs because there's a perceived benefit relative to the risks of the toxic effects. So that effect is magnified. The toxicity is magnified when you're water fasting. And so we don't fast anybody on these types of medications other than like a thyroid medication. And so the strategy then becomes to consult with me or a medical doctor or both to live a healthy enough diet and lifestyle so that you can come off the medication slowly in time for a water fast. And then even if you have slightly higher blood pressure because you just came off the meds, or slightly higher blood sugar because you just discontinued the oral hypoglycemics or the diabetes drugs, but then you start the water fast, and all of a sudden now these numbers start to improve at the same time that you start reducing the drugs. But you don't want to start water fasting on the drugs themselves, because then we run into problems. So that's one of them. Another. These are more rare
before
conditions.
You mentioned this.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah.
It's so. Do you find? I mean, if someone's afraid of fasting, but they're afraid, but they're reaching out anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if they're reaching out, then there's a good indication that they're not afraid. But I'm talking about the someone who comes and drags their spouse with them.
Yeah.
And they said, no, he needs to fast or she needs to fast, and she doesn't want to. And I can clearly see that they don't want to do it. Then what actually is interesting, what happens is they might come here. I saw this a lot at True North because they're a lot larger. Is spouse drags, or boyfriend or girlfriend drags their significant other with them, saying that they need to do this, and they're trying to be an example. And they say, no, they're not going to fast them if they don't want to. And so they just start eating the food. And then they meet other people in the dining room who have done fast, 17-day fast, 20-day fast, 5-day fast, and they look healthy, they survive, they tell them their experience. And all of a sudden, a few days later, the partner's like, all right, I'll give it a try. This sounds interesting. So, that is, they come to that on their own. But as supervising doctors, we really aren't trying to convince people to do it, because there's a lot of trials and tribulations that come with water fasting. And so if you're not there yet, no problem. It's just time to read more about it and maybe get your toe in the water in other ways, like maybe, doing a modified diet of some sort.
So it's great that you work with patients on their diet and lifestyle, even if they're not a candidate to fast. You kind of help them, get to a point to where they could do it safely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done a fair amount of fasting, juice fasting, water fasting, fasting mimicking diet, lots of different variations of fasting, and I'm a huge proponent of it. And so it's cool to connect with you, because I didn't even know about your clinic until recently and what you were doing. And when I learned that you worked with Dr. Goldhamer at True North, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. So what are some of the things that a person should know when they're, going into a fast, assuming they're qualified to do a fast, right? They're in a physical state that's, safe to fast. What do you see happen? What are these ups and downs and things?
Yeah, so that's a good question.
And I've never done a long one. Like 5 days is the most I've done.
Yeah.
So it's 2 weeks. 30 days. That's pretty intimidating.
It sure is. And it has to be done carefully, because the longer you go, the more you'll run into symptoms that look like detox, but actually are symptoms that it's time to break the fast. And so the best way to determine that is to take accurate baseline data, vital signs, blood work, et cetera, urinalysis, to make sure that you start off knowing where you started. And then you take periodic data, daily vitals, and then also blood work every week to compare that to every other blood value. And so if you do that, then you can see trends in how the body's reacting. And so trends that are going in a wrong direction are not good, obviously, and trends are going that are totally fine or just fine. So that's basically the best way you can tell. And so sometimes people will get, because of all the shutdowns and the lockdowns recently and all last year, I've been helping people do these fasting things at home because of this whole thing, because I think it's a lot easier. You got to create your comforts, and it's a lot easier than having to go, fly somewhere and stay in a place and not, disrupt your life a little bit. So, but yeah, you want to be careful. The shorter fasts are, 3 to 5 day fasts, no big deal. But also if you're doing a longer fast as well, there may be periods where you feel really intense and miserable. And you're essentially detoxing at a higher rate when you're fasting. So you're always detoxing, even if you're sick, and even if you're eating the standard American diet, but you detox much quicker and much more when you're fasting. So you can feel much more miserable and much quicker. And sometimes if people stop when that's happening, when they stop the fast, that can delay that feeling better. So knowing that is just useful, and just having some sort of guidance is sometimes useful too, the longer you go. But generally, I think if people aren't on medications and they eat really well beforehand, then they can do short fasts no problem and come out of it safely. The other issue too with fasting is a refeed period. So, refeeding syndrome is where you can have a metabolic imbalance because you intake too much calories and too much nutrition when you have been essentially undernutrition from the fast. So we avoid that by carefully refeeding people here at the clinic or guiding them on the phone, make sure they don't run into those problems. But like I met someone when I was in chiropractic school who, you can imagine the stereotype, dreadlocks, walks barefoot to class, you know what I mean? And he claimed that he went into the woods and did a water fast for 30 days and then walked out and went, hitched a ride all the way to the IHOP to have some burgers. I don't know if I believe him, but the point is that, doing that after a long fast is not a good strategy for health, not just for the refeeding syndrome, but also you're getting right back into the foods that caused your problems in the first place, very likely. So the refeeding part is a pretty important part of the fast, making sure that we get on good, healthy foods slowly. And also the lead-in diet, to making sure that we're not eating burgers and Chick-fil-A and steak tacos and whatnot before the fast as well, because the meat products will rot in your gut before as your fast goes on, and we don't want that.
What are some of the common detox symptoms, or is there anything that you do to help alleviate those?
We can't really do much about them. So the most common ones are going to be sleep disturbance. So it's not going to last the whole time. It's not going to last past the fast. It's usually just during the fast. And there's theories about this. One of the theories is that, your brain's basically saying you're not eating. So what are you doing? Sleeping and resting. You should be anxious, looking for food. That may be an adaptation. Who knows? And also you're not expending a lot of physical energy. So you're not as physically tired. That's another hypothesis there. But yeah, typically there's a little bit of insomnia that goes on during a water fast. There also can be some low back pain as there's less activity. People are usually laying down or in one position. Sometimes stretching can help. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they can just feel some low grade low back pain, and your kidneys are there, so there may be something going on there as well. And also some aches and body pains, through your joints. This is what's actually happening when your body's consuming some of the scar tissue and some of this autophagy that we've heard about recently. That it can result in some of these detox symptoms like aches and pains.
So your body will break down scar tissue on a fast.
Yeah, small amounts. Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking like strictures in the colon, but there can be scar tissues like in muscle areas and some joint pains and things like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when somebody comes to you and they start fasting, how do you determine how long a fast that, a person, what makes sense for a person to do?
Yeah, in general, the more chronic a condition, the longer a fast will be necessary to resolve it. And it also depends on how much time they can disrupt their life to do all this as well. So that's usually the limiting factor. But if someone didn't have a time constraint, then we'd evaluate just based on their entire health history, their blood, what their blood tests look like, how many nutrient reserves we suspect they might have given their height, their weight, and their diet in the last 6 months or a year. And that can kind of help guide us. There isn't really a set algorithm. But that would be nice though soon, is if we can have an algorithm. What I'd love to see though is an algorithm that can give you a much more concise amount of time. And also you take your blood sample, it'll tell you, okay, you might start getting some nausea and vomiting by day 6 or 7, and then you might start to feel certain symptoms. That would be really useful because then people kind of prep for it and they understand it. Right now, when I talk to people on the phone, when I consult them before they come, I kind of warn them just blanketly that, hey, it can be an intense, it could be a miserable experience. Like you might feel a lot of things like nausea, vomiting, headaches, aches, pains, low back pain. You might feel all of them. You might feel some of them. You might feel none of them. So, but what can help a lot is going to be the good, clean lead-in diet, the fruits and veggies beforehand.
Do you think that if someone is fasting and I guess it's obvious that someone has, if they're overweight or obese, right? They've got a lot of weight to lose. They've got a lot of stored up energy they can burn through, and they can go a lot longer. Do you turn people away if they're too thin, if they're underweight?
It depends on the context. So that's not it's not a direct contraindication to fasting. It's going to depend on how low they are. There's certain thresholds we don't want to go past. But it depends on the context, why they're underweight. Is it some anorexic process, or is it something else? Is it some process where they have Crohn's disease, for example, or they have some sort of gastric irritation that prevents them from eating, and so therefore they haven't been able to eat anything for a while, and that's why they're losing weight. That would be different than someone who's wants to be skinnier because 15% below their body weight is just not enough. It's not skinny enough. That would be a different process there as well. So it would depend heavily on what, no pun intended, on what they're why they're that thin.
What's the longest you've seen somebody fast?
42 days, a couple times, different people. So what typically will stop people is not the fat reserves, it's the nutrient reserves. So the electrolytes.
Yeah. That's 6 weeks. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And, I've always wondered why, why patients who, let's say, are fasting are not, why you're not able to give them like Myers cocktails or something like that, IV nutrients or even supplements, because, I've read research, the one thing I'm thinking of specifically is Valter Longo and how they do the fasting mimicking diet. And even on this modified, calorie restricted 5-day program that they do, I mean, they're still including some supplements in their program, which to me, I'm thinking it's only 5 days. Like, I don't think you're going to have any supplement deficiency in 5 days, but
right.
A week or 2 or 3 or 6, sure. So I've always wondered why there wasn't any supplementation given on a water fast, because it doesn't seem like it would be enough to interfere, right? It's not actual food. It's not calories.
Yeah, it's more about a conservative approach. If someone has some sort of signs that they're getting deficient in one nutrient, we don't assume that that's the only nutrient they might need. So we want to terminate. That's just a signal. Okay, your body's exhausted in some area, so we're just that's when we stop the fast. That if it's a limiting nutrient like sodium, for example, or potassium. So it's more of a conservative approach. So the data that I've read, anytime they've had some issues with refeeding or with fasting, it's been where people are either doing some sort of supplementation or non-calorie beverages like coffee or teas. And so it's more about a conservative approach of let's just respect what the body's doing. And if there's some signs to break the fast, we simply break the fast and move on to refeeding and do a fast at another time if we need to do that, rather than trying to continue a fast artificially by adding 1 or 2 or 3 particular nutrients in there.
That makes sense. And that's amazing. So you're in Southern California, and you've been running your clinic for how long?
This is our 5th year now.
Fifth year.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. And,
yeah.
what are some of the best, disease reversal or healing stories that you've seen with water fasting?
Gosh. So, I had, this was when I first, started fasting people, on my own. So I had a guy come in and he had really, bad vertigo and dizziness. Okay, this is called Meniere's disease. It's an autoimmune disease suspected. People, doctors don't really know too much about it other than you can give them some sort of drugs and sometimes they can mitigate it. But he was coming into my outpatient practice. I was doing chiropractic at the time, doing adjustments. And I'd been doing a technique that was really useful for that particular condition, Meniere's. And he was getting some benefit from it, but we looked at diet and thought, okay, if there's some way we can alter the diet and do a fast, let's see if we can get a better result. So we did an at-home fast where I was going to his house, checking him every day. He did 10 days, and 7 years of these vertigo and dizziness attacks basically went away. And he hadn't had them for years after that. And that was, we recorded a video of his story and put it on, so it's on my website. But that was really incredible. I hadn't seen that at True North before. I had heard about things, but I hadn't actually seen it. So this was really cool to watch. Another lady came in when I started Fasting Escape. She was one of the first patients that came here, and she had 30 years of high blood pressure. And she was on, she had high blood pressure. She was on, she had type 2 diabetes, and diabetes is measured by fasting blood sugar. And then there's an average blood sugar over about 3 months, and that's called an A1C. And so if you're above 6%, for your listeners, if you're above 6%, then you're diagnostic with type 2 diabetes. 5.7 is like, you're starting to get in the red zone, yellow zone. Well, her A1C was 13%, 14%, if you can believe that. And wow. And she had been going, this is one of the doctors that wasn't super supportive and was just like, okay, patted her on the back. Okay, go to that clinic in California and go, do what you got to do. But then essentially come back here, we'll get you back on the drugs. So she came here and she was on different medications. And so we couldn't start fasting her right away. So we just have her eat the food. And it took about, I think, a week and a half for her to get to lower her blood pressure and her blood sugar enough that she could justify reducing the meds until she was completely off of them.
Just eating a plant-based diet, right?
Just eating a plant-based, salt, oil, and sugar-free diet, which is really hard when you do the SOS free part. But here we were making it for us. It's, it's just, hey, just eat all you have to do is just, eat the food, much easier. So she did a water fast, I think 19 days worth, after which her blood pressure went down, reduced completely, and she got off all the meds, stayed off the meds. And then 3 months later, we did a follow-up A1C and it was to 6.9%.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So and her blood pressure is normal. Her doctor, actually, she said for the first time that she'd seen her doctor actually spent more than 5 minutes with her in the office. Like oh my God, it's so good to see you. How have you been? This is amazing. The doctor was just really proud of her, so it was kind of nice to hear that. And then, a year or two later, she had gotten follow-ups and she was essentially not diagnosed with diabetes anymore. And her blood pressure was 90/60. So, and she had lost a whole bunch of weight. She had gotten new clothes. She'd gotten a convertible. She sent me a picture over the new year saying, oh, look, now I'm on my convertible. She's just, Yeah,
that is one of the things about fasting, is you're going to have to get some new clothes. Mm-hmm. So that could be a positive or a negative, I guess, if you love all your clothes and you're kind of broke. Yeah. If you can't afford to buy new clothes, you've got a little bit of a challenge there. Well,
that's something you can do while you're fasting is learn how to sew and alter the clothes. Right? So,
yeah. What do you, speaking of that, are there any things that you recommend people do while they're on these extended fasts? I mean, rest I know is a big part of it, but just it's a lot. That's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. That's a lot of downtime.
Mm-hmm.
So
The thing is you really don't have a lot of mental energy to do much else. And so you can do like put together puzzles. Even reading is kind of sometimes tough. So people will bring books and bookcases. I mean, luggage full of books, and sometimes they get through one of them the entire time. And they tell me like, "Oh God, I thought I was going to read a book a day because I'd have the time," but they just don't feel the mental energy to do so. So that's if you do, that's fine. I've had some people who come here and they work. They do the work from home thing. And so they have to eke out a few hours every day. But for the most part, how they pass the time, I would say, is immerse yourself into the health world. So watch some DVDs that maybe you hadn't watched before. Watch some documentaries. Maybe if reading's too exhausting, do the audiobooks. But that may be a way to kind of immerse yourself so that when you leave, you feel like you're in the crowd of healthy eaters and healthy livers. And so that if you feel like you're in that crowd, then it maybe there may be some perceived social pressure to keep you on. I don't know. But I do find that people will say that they really like, if they immerse themselves in there, it makes it, they're kind of on it when they get back home.
yeah, so it's just it's an education process that they go through as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Goldhamer calls it brainwashing. So yeah.
That's as good a term as any.
Yeah.
The positive brainwash.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine there's probably some people watching or listening, and we should have done this at the beginning, who would like you to explain what is happening in the body when you fast.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that happen inside the body, and some of these are not as understood in humans as they are in animals, and so just keep that in mind. But what we're seeing is the 100% of people who do a water fast are going to lose weight. They're all going to lose weight. Okay, so your body's essentially burning off extra calories, and it's also reducing the volume of the fluid in your body because it doesn't need as much fluid when you're not intaking any food. So that's what happens to everybody. And so in this reduction of fluid, you also have reduction of blood pressure because there's less volume in the arteries themselves. And so that's why we see a large blood pressure drop over several weeks of blood pressure, over several weeks of fasting, compared to just about a dozen point drop with just medications. And so I think the Dr. Goldhamer study, they dropped 37 points on the systolic, the top number, just after an average of 11 days of fasting, whereas drugs, 12 points. So this is pretty standard. Everybody loses some blood pressure if they've had blood pressure problems. If they have normal blood pressure, they typically don't reduce their blood pressure too much. The other thing that can happen, that actually will happen, is with all of this.
But why is that? Can you explain?
Yeah.
What the mechanism, like why is their blood pressure coming down?
Right. So if we take a pie chart of what all the reasons that there could be high blood pressure, one of those reasons is that the volume of the blood is higher. And the reason why the volume of the blood is higher is because there's more water in the blood. And the reason why there's more water in the blood is because when you look at a cell, they've got sodium, potassium pumps. They maintain a very careful electrolyte balance. And so if you're eating a lot of sodium, then now you have an imbalance of the electrolytes, and your body now, instead of showing up on a blood test, your body will actually retain more water so that it dilutes those electrolytes.
Right.
So now your body retains the water. Now you have more water in your blood vessels and in your blood, and all of a sudden now more volume pressing against the arteries. Now you have higher blood pressure.
Yeah. I think everyone knows. That's something that everyone is heard. Right. You understand. Like if you eat too much salt, right, your fingers swell up. It's like you retain water. And
right.
But it's really interesting because I've never heard anyone explain it the way you did. And anytime I think of water retention, I'm not thinking about blood volume, right? I'm thinking about everywhere else in tissues, but not in blood. So that's really fascinating.
Right. And if any of your listeners want to try and experiment without, maybe if you don't really want to do a water fast, try this. For 2 days, eat nothing that has added salt in it, and just watch how much you're urinating and how thirsty you might get. Okay, this is your body responding to the fact there's not as much salt in your diet, and so it doesn't need to hold on to that water, so you'll urinate it out. But in those 2 days, and then all of a sudden, if you have some soy sauce or some salty food, you're going to get more thirsty and your body's going to retain that water. So you're going to watch your weight drop sometimes 2-3 pounds in one day. And that's because water weighs 10 pounds a gallon, essentially. And so that will explain, as far as weight loss goes, why sometimes people can lose 2-3 pounds in one day for 4 or 5 days in the beginning of their water fast.
And especially the first day or two, because you're losing poop weight, right?
Yeah.
It's poop weight. You're pooping out whatever's left in your digestive tract, and can be a pound or a couple pounds. So that's not real weight loss. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That comes back as soon as you start eating again. It's just the weight of food in your digestive system. But then the water weight too.
Right.
And
so
that doesn't necessarily come back if you stay eating a clean diet that's low in sodium.
Correct. Some of it does, though, because every food has electrolytes in there, that's how we primarily get it. And so you will gain some weight back, usually about 3 to 5 pounds after the water fast over a period of time. And also you're replenishing your reservoir tanks. Your glycogen reserves, and for every pound of glycogen reserves, you need about 2 pounds of water to circulate it and to store it. And so that's the carb effect. A lot of people think if they're on a keto style diet or whatnot, that they eat carbs and then they gain 2-3 pounds in a row. Oh my God, this is the carbs causing the problem. No, it's not that. It's that you're now retaining a little bit more water because the glycogen reserves are being replenished. And so that's where you're gaining the weight. It's not the carbs, it's the glycogen. So that can happen. That will happen right after a fast as well.
I've always, every time I've fasted, I've always, the weight comes back. And I want it to, right? Because I'm not trying to lose weight. So I'm one of those unique people that when I fast, I'm worried about the weight loss. Not really, but you know what I'm saying? I don't like it. I don't want it. You know what I mean?
Right. The men always want to gain weight. The women want to lose weight.
There's no pound that I want to lose, right? But yeah, every time I have done it, I have lost weight during the fast, and then I start eating again, and weight comes back pretty quickly, and it's just not a big deal.
Yeah. And so another reason why we not necessarily use fasting as a weight loss tool. We might use it as a get that momentum back and get you back on track. Because one of the other things that happens is if you fast long enough, your food the taste buds get more sensitive to healthy food. So that blander food before may actually taste pretty darn good after the fast. And so that can sometimes stop somebody who's overweight and essentially behaving in a way that they're low-grade addiction to food, that may get their taste buds back on track so that actually healthy food tastes pretty good, and then they can stay on a better diet after that.
Do you want to talk about autophagy and some of the other things that happen, while you're fasting?
Yeah. So there's some really interesting things. So as your body starts reducing this volume, there's also reduced inflammation. So inflammation is the body's response to acute injury. And so the solution to acute injury is to stop eating the stuff that's causing the acute injury. And so the minute you stop doing that, now your body's able to reduce that inflammation in the area. And so this is the process known as autophagy, and all the autophagy, the Nobel Prize is won because they discovered exactly where that's going on inside the cells. And so not much more to say about it without getting into big biochemistry discussion, which is above my head too. But other than your body's essentially eating itself and able to reduce a lot of the toxic chemicals and eliminate a lot of these things as you're going on the fast. And this is why we suspect the fast is so helpful, is it does what it normally does, but without interference with digestion. And there's a few things that can happen with the fast that don't happen even if you are digesting food. So it's really, really interesting to watch these people's conditions actually reverse themselves. Really what these diagnoses are just names for diseases of an unhealthy lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think the way I like to explain it is your body kind of switches into house cleaning mode, like a factory. And if there was a factory that's building cars and the shipment of cars stops, or the raw materials stop, it's kind of like the boss saying like, all right, well, we're not building cars today, but let's
cleaning the shop,
clean up. Let's fix up. Like, there's a broken window over here. Like, this is a mess over here, and it's just like, well, let's clean up the factory. Let's just spend all day or all week, rebuilding, fixing things, and dealing with stuff that's been put on hold because we've been so busy building cars.
Right. Right. And if you go too long, then all of a sudden now you're not getting income from the car parts. And so the bodies, then the workers start revolting because they're like, all right, we don't have enough energy to clean anymore.
Then it's time to stop. So you
Right.
mentioned this earlier. How do you tell, so some of well, I guess maybe you answered it, but I'll ask it anyway. Earlier you said, you have to be able to tell if someone is experiencing a detox symptom versus it's time to break the fast symptom. And I'd like to know what those symptoms are typically that could be confused, right? That could be one or the other. And then also, I'm assuming your answer is based on their blood work and their vitals is how you can tell.
Yeah, nausea is one of them. So sometimes nausea can mean that they
Really?
have some bile response,
Mm-hmm.
and so they just need to vomit it out, and that can be fine. But it also can sometimes represent the beginnings of an electrolyte imbalance. So we would need to be examining them and checking them, daily to find that out, and then also get some blood work to make sure to rule that out as well.
So the nausea is one of the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
And just so people understand, when your liver is really aggressively detoxing, then it's just going to push a lot of bile out, right? And that's what's going to trigger that nausea.
Yeah, the gallbladder sac, the sac that stores the bile, can sometimes try to clean out the bile ducts, is my understanding of it. And then if it goes up, then you feel nausea. If it goes down, you have loose stools.
Got it. Well, Nathan, this has been awesome. Really good. Great to connect. Thank you for taking the time to share your experience, and I'm excited for people to get to know you and connect with you. I'm sure you'll get some emails and phone calls and after this, and some new patients, and that's great. The more people we can steer, in your direction, right, which is working with a doctor that understands health, and it takes a holistic approach to help people heal, and understands that ultimately the body it can heal if it's given the right. I always say it's given the right nutrients and care, but sometimes it's not about the nutrients, right? It's just about the care, right? You take away the nutrients for a little while and just let it do its thing. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap the interview?
No, I really appreciate you having me on. This has been fantastic. And like I said, I'd read your book, and it was really, really, it was really fascinating. I really loved your journey and all the statistics you had in the beginning too. I had suspected for a while that a lot of these therapies don't really do very much. And seeing those statistics was like, oh my God, it's worse than I thought. All I can say is that for, a lot of times, even if we know what the right move is, as far as our diet, sleep, and exercise, we live in a modern world that makes it that is not making it easy for us. So we've got artificial light, we've got artificial food, we've got artificial even emotions through social media, too much social media and whatnot. And so what happens is it can sometimes cause an addictive response in our brains and make it very difficult to come out of the trap. And we kind of know that the way to break the cycle is to get a break. So if you're addicted to social media, for example, now there's apps out there that you can give yourself a break, okay, and remove them from your phone for a certain period of time, and then when you come back, you're like, okay, we're reset. We've that constant impulsive behavior of checking it every day or 20 times a day or whatnot has now reduced a little bit, okay, and sometimes even a lot. Okay. Well, the same thing's true with sleep. So we now know that if you go outside and you go on a camping trip for 2 weeks, you can reset your circadian rhythms. Okay. And so that can reset the artificial light and the stimulation of these blue lights and whatnot that can make sleep really difficult until now you're getting a good sleep and you're happy with it. Well, the same thing's true of food. Food is addictive. Okay, the foods that are addictive are the very foods that taste really good relative to the healthy foods, and so we run the risk of having a low grade addiction where people are they wake up after years and they're like, oh my God, how did I gain this weight? How did I get this disease? How did I do this? And yet once they realize it, they can't get out because the food is trapping them in. So the right move there is to take some sort of break. Whether it's booking an Airbnb or going on vacation somewhere for a couple of days and just eating clean foods for a couple of days, or going to a place like True North or Fasting Escape or something like that, like Duco program, or there's plenty of programs like that. Sometimes taking a break is what it takes to just break that cycle, get that momentum back. And it doesn't take too long. Some people, if they're having disease processes, maybe longer, but it doesn't take too long to do that. It's a good way to reconnect as well with a lot of different processes too. So all I have to say is don't be ashamed if you've fallen into a trap. This is pretty normal nowadays, okay? And everybody does it. Everybody's into it. There's a few genetic freaks out there who seemingly can take it and run with it and never go back. But that's going to be the exception, not the rule. So we learn. They struggle just as much as we struggle sometimes. They just got some secret sauce that not everybody has. So be patient with yourself. Yeah,
that's great encouragement. And you're right, man. We're surrounded by addictive stuff, bombarded by addictive stuff. And that I'm glad you mentioned the social media detox or internet detox, news detox, right? Because it's not just about letting your body rest, but also letting your mind rest and, getting used to, being comfortable with your own thoughts. And I should mention this too, although I kind of said like that's the wrap up, but I want to throw this out there because I'd love to hear your thoughts about it too. But I know personally, and I've seen this experience with a lot of people, is when you fast, your food is medication. And so when you stop the medication, then what happens is oftentimes people get very emotional. Mm-hmm. Because they have some unresolved emotional issues in their life. They've got bitterness or unforgiveness towards people. They've got some guilt and shame for, things in their past, and they've got stresses. And so all that stuff sort of bubbles up, right? Because you've removed their medication for it.
Sure.
And so, is that pretty common? You see that, and it's something that's, I feel like whenever I've talked about fasting, it's like, I try to make people aware, like, hey, you need to expect that you're probably going to be pretty emotional here, at least in the first phase.
Right. You're kind of vulnerable. So all kinds of different heightened sensations. So sense of taste, smell, emotional volatility can happen. The biggest issue is that very often if someone knows what they have to do or knows what they in principle need to do, but they just can't do it because they're in a world, an environment where it's not easy to do, then it eats away at them. Okay. And it causes them to actually lower their own confidence in their ability to solve that particular problem. And so lowering your confidence is another way of saying lower self-esteem. You have lower esteem of yourself because you haven't been able to solve what you perceive to be the most pressing problem in your life, which is how to make yourself a better human being, health-wise.
Yeah, you feel like you're failing at it.
Yeah. And so this anxiety is actually totally legitimate because the person is failing at that problem. And there's nobody out there that they have found yet to help them solve that problem. It turns out, though, that I can perceive that when people come in, but it doesn't take too long, a few days, a few weeks, depending on the person, that now they start to feel a little bit of that sensation called pride. That now they can see, I'm not there yet, but I'm on the right track. Okay. That sense of pride, you can't get in a bottle. Okay. You can't buy it. You have to earn it through hard work. And that's something that is, it's a joy to watch people start to feel that pride. I've had, I recently talked to a lady who's in her 80s, and she said, I know I'm on my way out, but I just want to solve this problem before I go. I want to feel proud of myself just for once. I've been struggling with my weight forever. And so this is a tough thing to deal with. This is by no means easy. And we're not going to expect that someone goes 100% and never goes back. But what we want to be doing is we want to engage in enough effort that we feel proud of our own efforts.
Man, that's some good wisdom right there. I love it. It reminds me, of something that I talk about, which is when I adopted a raw food diet. It was, it's a radical diet, right? It's hardcore, and something happens psychologically, and what you're saying is explaining it better than I ever have, I feel like. But something happens psychologically when you start eating a raw food diet and you get it dialed in and you're doing it, it unlocks something in your mind right? And pride is a part of this. I see that now, that it's like, oh, you feel proud of yourself, you feel accomplished, but it also unlocks something in my mind, and I've seen others too, where they basically say, well, if I can do this, what else can I do?
Right.
Right.
Self-efficacy is starting to increase.
Yeah. And it gives them that ambition and confidence that they can do more, right? Mm-hmm. That they're not just like, a helpless victim of disease,
right?
Worthless failure, just all these really difficult.
This is the number weight loss, for example, and health related issues is the number one goal in every New Year's resolution.
Yeah.
This is a pressing problem. And a lot of times it seems like people feel like if they can just get past this, they can get on with life essentially. And so no wonder they struggle with other things, because like, well, if I can't even solve this, and what does society tell us about just weight loss itself or even diet changes? Oh, it's simple. You just have to put your foot down and do it. It's not that simple. Okay. What do they tell you about weight loss? Oh, you just got to eat less and move more. And that's the simple solution for the whole thing. It's like, no, this is a much bigger problem. It's a much bigger issue than it is made out to be. And so it's a misunderstanding, I think, with a lot of people, is they can't get past it. So as a result, they don't feel like they can do anything else.
Well, man, so much encouraging and empowering and wise information. Thank you so much, Dr. Nathan Gershfeld. And again, people can find you at fastingescape.com, but also on social media. Where can they find you there?
I have a Facebook page, Fasting Escape Retreat Center, and then also once in a while we'll post like some of the things we cook here at Fasting Escape on Instagram, and I believe it is Fasting Escape. It's at Fasting Escape, so I don't do too much social media, just because, not for any displays or anything. It's just more that I just don't know too much about how they all work. So
we will figure out where it is and post a link to it in the show notes. So, all right, man, this has been really great. Thanks everybody for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and most importantly, share this with people that you care about. There are people in your life. Look, almost over 70% of Americans are overweight. Over 40% are obese. Like, we have a national health crisis. And because of obesity being the number 2 cause of cancer, but it's also the number 1 cause of heart disease and diabetes and so many other chronic diseases. And they can be reversed. They can be healed. And you just have to have the right guidance. And so doctors like Nathan Gershfeld and so many others, they're doing the best work possible for patients, which is helping them heal themselves. Like, what a concept. So anyway, I just thrilled that we got to connect. Thanks again. Share this video, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Gershfeld. See you soon.
Thank you.